Hi, and welcome to the first episode of this series where we try to look at all the event types in Wwise in depth. And hopefully, you'll learn something and find ways to improve the sound of your games and even use Wwise for post production for film and TV and animation. Wwise is a really powerful tool, so I hope you learned something. So, what are events? Events are basically the way the game communicates with Wwise. A lot of people think that it's only about playing sounds, but actually, your game engine can interact with Wwise in many ways. So let's look at them. For these tutorials, we're gonna look at the game Frog, aka Todpole, which I worked on as the audio lead during my year studying sound design at Vancouver Film School, alongside Yusuke Konishi, who made the music and ambiences for the game. Frog is a puzzle game where you play as a toy frog and you use your tongue to grab onto various objects in the game and interact with them and solve puzzles. It's a really cool game, really designed in like a very physics-based way, so things don't have set animation, they just happen in unique ways. So we used events to make our sounds more dynamic and versatile and malleable. So let's start with the most basic event type, which is the play event. That's the most essential event that you have because it plays sounds and you need a lot of those, and that's the bulk of what you're going to be using in Wwise. So let's look at one. Play events can play entire sound structures, so you don't need one play event per each sound asset. So as you can see, I have this play footsteps event, which takes care of all my footsteps. So in this game, there are many surfaces, like different surface types, and each one has its own unique sound. So the programmers would kind of tag each surface based on basically what it's made of. So we got cardboard, metal, plastic, and all that stuff. And we just fill those containers. So if we go to the audio tab and take a look here, you'll see that I have two switches within one switch container. We'll come back to the very top level switch container in the later videos. But let's look at our footsteps barefoot. So as you can see, it has many different switches inside of it, and then each one contains a container which has, 4 or 5 kind of different footstep sounds per surface, and then they have pitch and volume and low pass filter randomization, which makes them more random, and some other stuff which we'll possibly get to later. So let's listen to one of them. So here I have the footsteps snow, which is a random container with 5 footsteps in it. And as you can see, it has randomization on volume, pitch, and low pass filter. They all do. I also used an EQ to create more variation, but that's a whole nother story. As you can see, my other surfaces are all blend containers because we thought, okay, this is a frog. It kind of has wet feet. So we have the surface sound, like cardboard, and then we have this squish layer. So the squish layer is first of all shared by all the other surfaces, so that's why it has way more variations than the normal footsteps. Usually 5 or 10 is plenty. And yeah, because frogs have wet, sticky feet, that's just a cool layer to have in there. And again, everything is randomized to the max. Wwise is a great tool to use for randomization. I kind of use this trick that I picked up from Francesca Del Pia, who makes the I Dream of Wwise tutorial series, which I highly recommend to everybody. He basically uses kind of an EQ where certain frequency bands are boosted or attenuated randomly, so that creates variation in coloration. So you get really infinite variation. So next up are the stop, pause, and resume events. Obviously, if you play a sound, you may want to stop it at some point, and that's where they come in. Actually, if you take a look at the Wwise documentation, it mentions that stopping, pausing, and resuming sounds can be a little inefficient for programming. So you can also use some basic scripting using execute action on event to kind of control that. So that way you just need your play event. But again, a whole nother series for that, which we will get to eventually. But anyway, there are some other ways where you can use stop events. So don't use stop events to just stop all sounds or something like that. but there are times where you want to stop certain sounds. For example, our frog has vocalizations. So we don't want two vocalizations to play at the same time. So that's him celebrating, falling, and getting hit. And as you can see, when the frog gets hit, we want him, if he was like in the middle of a jump or making a sound as if he was scared, we want those sounds to stop before the sound of him getting hit plays. Otherwise, we'll hear two voices from a single entity, right? So that's why I have these stop events here. So basically, when the frog gets hit, first all other vocalizations are stopped. Obviously, we don't need to worry about the idle, or celebrate in that case. So yeah, that's one way that I use the stop event when I want, things like doubling of dialogue not to happen. That's a really neat way to use the stop event. As for pause and resume, they're basically, I think they're most useful for doing just that. Like if you pause the game, pause all the sounds, and when you resume, just resume the sounds from the same place that you started from. So basically there's no real like trick that I know personally of how to use pause or resume. Just use it when you need to pause or resume. And, if you know different ways of using these things, obviously there are multiple ways of doing the same thing, and you can do a million things with one event type. So I would love to hear your thoughts and what you use, these event types for that I may not use so much or I may find inefficient. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.